Welcome everyone to Screams After Midnight. I am Peter, and joining me as always is Tim.
Thanks for having me.
Alright, so this is a horror movie podcast. We talk about horror films, we get together, we've watched a movie and we discuss it. It really is quite that simple. This is part of our Vampire Month here in January of 2021. We're recording in advance, so maybe the world's a better place than what it is right now. I hope it is, but you'll know better than we do because you're watching this in January. In the future, because we're in the past, looking ahead to the future. So this was actually Patreon vote winner. We did a vote on patreon.com/MailFuzzTV at the $5 tier and up for films in each of the theme months that we've got coming up that we're sort of banking for Tim's Patreon leave. Paternity leave was the phrase I was looking for there. And the winner of the vampire vote was none other than From Dusk Till Dawn, which came out in 1996 and is directed by Robert Rodriguez and written by Quentin Tarantino. And what a weird concoction of people behind a movie. I mean, we don't really talk about Tarantino much on this show because, well, he doesn't really do horror films. Maybe he will at some point, and that'll be an interesting thing to discover. But
I mean, I guess like Death Proof is kind of the closest thing.
Yeah.
I think most people consider it a horror movie. I don't know, like kind of is, I guess. But
I feel like, again, Planet Terror is more the horror movie, but because they're bundled together, it kind of it gets lumped in that sense. It's an interesting thing, but so we'll talk about the movie, of course. We'll start off spoiler free. We'll give you warning before we go into spoilers somewhere in the middle if you've not seen From Dusk Till Dawn. This is the original film, because of course there was a couple of sequels and even a Netflix TV show much later, which I never did see, but I've heard some positive things about it, so maybe it's good.
Really? Oh.
Yes, I have. I mean, maybe they're fools. I don't know. I can't tell you. What's interesting though is this also stars Quentin Tarantino. He's kind of in the second. Oh, maybe second lead's not the right term, because Harvey Keitel might be the second lead. Obviously, George Clooney's kind of the one first and foremost. But you got a younger Juliette Lewis in there. You got Selma Hayek in a small role, Danny Trejo, Tom Savini, Cheech is playing like 3 different roles. It's a hell of a cast. Fred Williamson's in there as well. Very, very in-depth cast. John Saxon even has like a cameo, essentially.
I always forget that.
Yeah. To the point where, because I saw his name in the credits at the start, and I thought, oh, I forgot he was in this, and no wonder I forgot he's in like a cameo. It's like, I'm surprised he was even credited, because he just shows up for like one scene on the TV.
Yeah.
But still though, clearly there's a love of the genre. There's a love of like just like genre filmmaking in general in this. You feel like they're playing a lot of homage to various things. Of course, it's a vampire movie, but From Dusk Till Dawn is kind of a notorious vampire movie in that the first half of the film, you wouldn't ever think it was going into a vampire movie. You would think, oh, I'm watching a Tarantino thriller. And then the second half, once the vampire set, oh, now it's a cheesy Robert Rodriguez schlocky movie. And it's a really weird transition. And I guess we'll talk about if we think that's successful and what that gives to the movie and all the rest of it. But I assume you'd seen this before.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, of course. All right. So in that case, Tim, okay. I get the premise. I always get the premise on. So the Gecko brothers, played by Clooney and Tarantino, are 2 bank robbers and brothers, of course, who are introduced at the start of the film as being on the run. We see them go do a couple of different sort of nasty deeds at the start. We'll talk about that in spoilers, but ultimately they end up kidnapping this family, with Harvey Keitel being this kind of former pastor and his 2 children. Who are sort of, late teens, early 20s kind of thing. And they force them to help them cross the border into Mexico. And they go to a bar called the Titty Twister for their criminal dealings, and ultimately end up in the middle of a vampire den. So that's kind of the gist of the film. Tim.
Yeah.
What is your feelings on From Dusk Till Dawn?
I absolutely love this movie. I think it's such a blast. There's some stuff that doesn't hold up super well. Like some cheesy mid-90s special effects and whatnot. But I mean, I think it's just a really fun ride. It's like you said, it's hard to talk about it without acknowledging the fact that it does feel like 2 separate movies. So I'm kind of just focusing on the vampire part here. But I mean, I will say, I do like the beginning as well, even though it's, like in no way, shape, or form really like a horror movie. I still think, it is compelling, especially if you're a Tarantino fan. Like it feels very, Tarantino-esque. It's
Yeah,
you know,
I wonder if, like, obviously it credits Robert Rodriguez as the director and
mhm,
Tarantino as the screenplay writer. Uh,
mhm,
I do really have to wonder though, like, the first half feels like it's directed differently, and I wonder
yeah,
if on set Tarantino was really just directing the first half as well, because it kind
a
of
good
feels like it
question. Yeah.
in a lot of ways. Because the direction feels different once the vampires hit.
Yeah.
Uh, I don't know, but I like the movie a lot too. I honestly watching it again now, having not seen it in maybe like 10 years or however long it's been. I'd forgotten just how strong it was from a directorial point of view, and maybe I'll say something that Tim's really going to disagree with here, but I actually
Oh
think
no.
the first half's better than the second half. I think it's a stronger made section of the film, and I think it's really smart, really tense. Uh, like I'm kind of on edge, and I enjoy the second half. Don't get me wrong, I'm not dissing the second half, but
I mean, I think it's I mean, I wouldn't necessarily disagree with it, but I feel like it's almost so hard to compare because they're like such completely like different things, Like and I'm surprised at like obviously I remember that that there is quite a bit of stuff that happens before the vampire stuff starts, but I was thinking like because it had been a while since I've seen it, but I was thinking like, oh yeah, that's probably like what, like maybe like a half an hour before we get into it. And no, it's like actually there's actually more of the beginning than there is the vampire stuff. It's like pretty much like a full on hour before it
mm,
starts, and then you get about like 40 minutes of vampire.
yeah, and I do kind of like the idea of like, okay, you want these characters to have this shock that they're surrounded by
Mhm.
vampires, and how do you shock the audience with that? Well, you do it in a way where you literally have a different movie playing for like half of it, and then be
Yeah.
like, "Oh shit, it's a vampire movie!" Like, I do appreciate the audacity of that, and the just whatever inspired that choice is
Mhm.
kind of fascinating. Eh, you know, it's definitely unique and it feels unique. I
Yeah.
think the movie is very well directed and the characters are fairly well defined. I think Clooney and Tarantino especially are very charismatic to watch. They're very exciting
Mhm.
to watch, and that's you know might be my favorite George Clooney thing.
Oh, what more than what Batman and Robin, or is that the one he did, or
Well, he did, yes, he was in that. But I'm trying to think, what else has Clooney done that I have actually seen? I'm trying to think. No, I'm talking about it.
I mean, I guess maybe a lot of people would probably say like Ocean's 11, and I guess he's very charismatic in that.
Oh, I guess. I mean, Up in the Air was not bad. Michael Clayton's not bad. Uh,
What was the
I was in
what was
I
it?
do. I do love Gravity, but he's not the main character in that
Oh
though.
yeah, um, the Burn After Reading. That was the Coen
Oh yeah,
Brothers one
yeah,
he was in.
yeah.
I
He's
like
in
that
that.
one.
Yeah. No, quite right. Quite
Um,
right.
no, I mean, yeah, Clooney is like a very charismatic guy. It's obvious to see why, he's a star and everything. Yeah, I mean, this might be my favorite thing of his, just because I lean towards genre stuff, but um, yeah, I mean he's pretty good in everything he does, and then like, yeah, I think it's funny, like, you know, I think Tarantino, isn't necessarily like the best actor, but I do think it really works for this character, which is just like, this pervy creep.
Yeah, of course. His first, actually, no, it's his second movie credit is for Grizzly 2, the concert.
Of course.
I just putting that out there. Yeah,
They said they were supposed to release that soon. I wonder what the status of that is.
oh, I wonder too. We're all waiting with bated breath for Grizzly 2, the concert. Um, yeah, yeah, Tarantino's like very impressive in this. Like, it's just, obviously he gave himself obviously parts in Reservoir Dogs and from Pulp Fiction before this. But seeing him just in a movie that he's not directing, although I suspect that there was a little bit of input there, it's
Sure.
really interesting. And seeing him be like the person who's always with George Clooney and them interacting a lot, I'm like, that Tarantino's actually a pretty decent actor. Like, I mean, maybe he's just like good at doing like a creepy version of himself, where he's like he's turning everything up to 11, and he's like being this creepy perv, and kind of like, you know, because his character in this is essentially that he's basically psychotic. You know, he imagines people saying things that they're not saying, and gets really paranoid and does really nasty things because of it.
Especially to like women and stuff.
Yeah, definitely. Actually, I laughed out loud. There's a point in this movie where Salma Hayek, who plays like a stripper in the bar, she straight up puts her foot in Tarantino's mouth, and I started laughing like just like hysterically, because it's become kind of a running gag that Tarantino seems to be a bit obsessed with feet, because he's always putting like people's feet like in these movies. So I'd forgotten this happened in this. So when she put her foot, because I remember her being like seductive and dancing in front of him and all that, but I didn't remember the foot getting in the mouth. And all I could think was, wait, you cast yourself in this movie and wrote this yourself. You wrote this in the script. You did this. Yeah. Maybe you didn't know it was going to be Salma Hayek, but you knew, you wrote down, sexy stripper puts her foot in my mouth. Like, you put that in there.
Yeah, it's a bit strange.
Creepy bastard. But, you know, he's actually very good. He's very compelling to watch.
I think at the very least, if you're going like the, you know, list of directors that put themselves in movies, he's, you know, as far as acting ability goes, he's probably high up on there.
He's better than Shyamalan. I'll say that. I mean, it seems a disservice to even bother comparing him to Tommy Wiseau, but he's definitely better in that case too. And even like, you know, Hitchcock. Like, Hitchcock was smart enough to know that he wasn't an actor, so he just gave himself like walk past the screen cameos, or, you know, he just was standing somewhere. So I don't really want to compare it, because he didn't give himself parts. He gave himself like legitimate just like cameos. But yeah, but, you know, to be fair, he has done quite a good job with acting. Although notably, it's something that he's kind of like done less as the more time has went on.
Yeah,
because has he been in much like? Because he wasn't in the last few films he made, I don't think. I'm pretty sure he opted out.
Was Django Unchained the last one he was in?
Was he? What was he in that?
It was towards the end. He's like, for some reason, I think he's like Australian or something.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that. Yeah, that may be the last time he gave himself a part in one of his own movies. Which maybe it's just because maybe he liked doing it, but it's not like his passion. You know, obviously he loves to direct and write and all that. Maybe as he's getting older, he's like, you know what, I'm getting too old to be the actor now. I'm just behind the camera. But and the rest of the cast are relatively solid. It feels like, you know, Fred Williamson and Tom Savini. It feels like some genre icons kind of getting a little bit of shine when they get to the bar.
If I maybe have any, you know, complaint, you know, it's that I feel like their characters are so fun. I want to see more of them. Like it's a little unfortunate that I feel like we're kind of, you know, they're kind of dispatched like a little faster than I thought, because it's like I mean, once like the vampire stuff starts happening, like I'm a lot less interested in these main characters, like, you know, especially the, you know, like Harvey Keitel and like, you know, the son and daughter and stuff. Like, once his vampire stuff starts, they're kind of like the least interesting. And then but like, you know, Sex Machine and you know, Fred Williamson's character and stuff, like they're just really fun to watch, and you really want to follow.
I mean, they're out of a different movie. I think this is why it feels. It's not just that they introduce vampires out of nowhere, like an hour out of the movie. It's that all these other characters who are in the bar, who end up like fighting alongside the main characters, they're all out of like goofy B movies, where they're kind of like, you know, charismatic but in like a fun, cheesy way. You know, it feels, you know, the fact that Sex Machine has that weird gun dick thing that he has, right. Like, you know, just this weird silly stuff that it feels like it doesn't fit with the serious thriller. Because everything about the movie up until that point, before the titty bar, or Titty Twister is the name of the bar, sorry, is that it is very sort of like grimy and like a thriller and realistic and tense, and it's all about character tension, and it doesn't feel like it's doing anything super like, you know, surreal or otherworldly or anything like that. And then you've got these characters who are kind of cracking one-liners and you know, there's jokes about how they're killing vampires and stuff, you know, with pencils and all the rest of it. It feels like it is a totally different movie in tone, as well as just the fact that there's vampires all of a sudden. Maybe it'd even be interesting to see if it didn't change tone. Like, what if it just kept that tone, but now there's vampires? Like, that might have been an interesting thing to see. But yeah, when in Mexico, you know, I think, for some reason, the line of dialogue that I always sticks out in my mind from this movie is when Juliette Lewis asks Tarantino what's in Mexico, and he just says Mexicans.
Yeah.
He thinks he's. It doesn't feel like he's been a smart ass either. It feels like that's just his answer. It's like he's taking the question just at face value, and that's what he's saying.
Yeah, that feels like a very witty, like Tarantino, little bit of dialogue.
It is, yeah. So no, it's a really solid time, honestly. Like it's a really, like charismatic, tense film, which, depending on your taste, you might really dislike.
Sure.
The tone shift when it does shift. Luckily, I like both types of movie. But I will say the goofier side of it does feel a little bit weirder after you've had like an hour of like serious thriller. So that's maybe the one thing, is that maybe when it first changed, there was a couple of moments where I'm like, oh, this feels weird now. Like I was like engrossed in this really sort of down to earth thriller for the last like hour, and now it's like switched to, you know, like goofy melting vampires.
Yeah, and that's why I was trying to talk to some people on Twitter about it to see if, like, you know, what it must be like if there was someone that like didn't know about the kind of swerve that happens, because I do find that fascinating. Like, and you know, I look back and I talked to some people, and it looks like it was always promoted, you know, as being like a, you know, having vampires and being that kind of movie and stuff. So I'm assuming most people that actually went to the theaters weren't surprised by it, but yeah, it's one of those things where if you know, didn't really grow up with it and you just randomly like put it on, like, yeah, I do wonder like how shocking that is. And you know, I think it's such a thing that could very easily go south, you know, like if it's in the wrong hands. Like, yeah, if you had different actors that weren't as charismatic, if you have like, you know, less talented writers or directors, it seems like an idea that's just, you know, really, really tough to pull off. But I mean, luckily there's just so much talent in here involved that, you know, is it necessarily a smart move, you know, to do it this way? I don't know, but I mean, it's like these people like can't help but, you know, make something interesting and compelling. And yeah, you know, yeah, I agree that this first half is extremely engrossing, even though, you know, it's not horror. But man, in different hands, I wonder, you know, how much of a pain it would be to sit through.
Oh yeah, it's yeah. Tarantino's script is what makes it sing in that first half. It's just this is, you know, that and the direction and the acting. I suppose it's more than one thing then, I guess. But the point I'm making is that it feels like a Tarantino movie, and then it changes into a schlocky vampire movie. Do you know what just popped in my head? I actually just remembered looking at the poster on IMDb right now, is that when I was doing art in high school, one of the written pieces of work that I had to do was compare like three pieces of like similar art, right? And I remember what I did I can't remember what the third one was, but it was the original Dracula poster, the From Dusk Till Dawn poster, and then like I think like a new, at the time, a new vampire movie. And the idea was that I was comparing like how they all kind of like how they've changed throughout the years, but how they're also kind of clearly promoting similar types of film, despite the fact that there's such a big time difference between, you know, the 30s and then the 90s and then whatever, you know, mid 2000s I was looking at. I thought about it as I was looking at it because
that's interesting.
Yeah. I don't know, just to pop back into my head as I was as you were talking there. Yeah. So yeah, I think we'll you know go into the spoilers in a second here then. So I will take this time to thank our Patreon producers for the month at the time of recording, at least. Obviously, in the video at the end, an up-to-date list when this goes out will be there. But at the time of recording, thank you to Tyler Hess, Cindy Palacios, David Short, Board Now, Al Tribesman, Christopher Moy, Brett Williams, and David Brown. They are Patreon producers, which means they are patrons at $20 or more on patreon.com/MailFuzzTV. You can, of course, support us over there as well. You can do that for as little as $1 per month, and at that $1 tier, you get access to all of our bonus episodes that we have been putting out over the last couple of years. It's about 26, I think, by the time you get there. And that is something that typically goes up every month. Obviously, we're taking a little bit of a break whilst Tim's on paternity leave, but you can check out all that back catalogue. You get early access at the $5 tier. So a lot of goodies over there if you want to go and support everything we do. You can, of course, do all that, though, without spending a penny. If you want to support us, you can just do that by hitting the like button on YouTube. Hitting the like button is super important. Helps us out with the algorithm, promotes us more on YouTube, and helps us find more audience members, as do comments and things like that. 5-star reviews of the podcast on whatever podcast app you use, also very good. So yes, thank you very much for your support. But full spoilers for From Dusk Till Dawn, the original film. The opening sequence is fantastic. I don't know how you feel about the opening in the gas station, but it's
love it.
It's you have this U.S. Marshal who comes in and talks to John Hawkes, who just happens to be the guy in the station. Do you know who that is? Do you recognize him? No?
No.
Really?
Not off the top of my head, no.
I mean, if nothing else, he was in I Still Know What We Did Last Summer, so you should know him from that.
Oh, of course.
If nothing else.
Like, my favorite movie.
He's in tons of stuff. I mean, what would you know him from? He was in 3 Billboards Outside of Ebbing, Missouri. He was in Winter's Bone. He was in Me and You and Everyone We Know. He was he was in Lost. I forgot he was in Lost. He was in tons of stuff. American Gangster, apparently. I don't remember him in that, but apparently he was there.
Okay. Take your word for it.
Okay, apparently Tim doesn't know who John Hawkes is, but for everyone else, a young John Hawkes is the clerk in this movie. And he's in his 30s, he's not that young, but he's young comparatively to the fact that everything else I've seen him in was after this. But so he's just making small talk, and it mentions on the radio, I think as he's going in, that there's these 2 bank robbers, and the marshal even brings it up that these 2 guys are going for the border, which would be putting them right through us. So he looks forward to try to catch them, and he goes to the bathroom, and then it's revealed that they're already there. Like, these 2 guys are in the store, and they've got hostages that they've grabbed, and they're like, hey, no, you better play it cool and make him leave without thinking anything's wrong. And he's like, yeah, I'm doing it, man, I'm doing it. Like, come on. Like, it was very natural. Like, there's not really much of a hint beforehand that there's anything wrong until they pop out.
Yeah.
But this is where we're kind of introduced to the idea that Tarantino is a little bit challenged. Yeah, a little bit not all there. Where he's convinced that he was sending him signals when he was talking to the marshal. And basically, when the marshal comes back out and the guy's making small talk, Tarantino just walks back up behind him and shoots him in the back of the head. And he's, everyone starts freaking out, and George Clooney's like, "Why did you do that? What did you do?" Like, he mouthed "help me" at him, and he's like, "No, he didn't. No, I didn't. No, I didn't." And obviously, a shootout breaks out. I totally forgot that this ends with Tarantino shooting all the booze that's like up in the counter behind him, and then Clooney throwing in like a just a flaming toilet roll, so that he just gets caught on fire.
Yeah, that's like I was laughing so hard because it's one of those things where it's like so over the top. Like you think, oh, okay, he's dead at this point, and then he comes up to the point where he's like still shooting at them while he's on fire, which is so great.
And then he lands in the all the bags of popcorn, which start popping because of the fire. Yeah, it's a really over the top death. So there is a bit of humor to it, even though it's this really sort of like tense thriller throughout. But you just have this scene. And again, it's really darkly funny because George Clooney's kind of like as they're walking away from this gas station, which is blowing up behind them in their wake. This is the chaos that like seems to happen wherever they go. And George Clooney's like, "I just told you to go in and buy the map of the state and leave. That was all I asked you to do." And Tarantino's just like, "Oh, he recognized me." It's like, no, he did not. He didn't recognize anything. So again, this entire situation where they've had these hostages, where they've had to kill like 2 people, all of this is because Tarantino, his character, is just like edgy and like doesn't believe anything and sees what he wants to see. So it sets up immediately this idea of tension, and also the idea that Clooney is the more empathetic one between them, even though he's still quite vicious and still threatens to kill people left and right.
And I love their I think it's like so interesting their relationship where Clooney would be so better off without him. Like he's Tarantino is such a liability. He's such a everything with him is like on a hairpin trigger. Like every you're just, it's not a matter of like if he's gonna get set off, it's just when. And I love that Clooney still like has this sense of like responsibility for him where he feels like he has to like stand up for him and keep him by, and even though it's like he also shows him tough love and gets angry at him and stuff when he messes up, but it's like he there's still this like brotherly love there that I think is interesting.
And again, it's just something that it makes Clooney a bit more empathetic. Not Tarantino. Tarantino's like doesn't do anything for him per se, but it does do stuff where Clooney's like looking out for him, even though he's this, even what he's like, he still sort of like looks out for him. Because there's the whole scene where, because they get to the motel and they've got this like a bank teller that they have kidnapped in the back of the car, and they bring her in. And Clooney makes this big speech about, here's the rules. You don't speak, you don't ask questions, you don't try to run. And if you do all this, you will be alive, I promise. You have my word. And he does this a couple of times in the movie where he like basically says, you have my word. If you follow what we say, you will not be killed. Like, you will get away. And every time it ends up being Tarantino who ends up like just killing the person or snapping or something. But Clooney comes back with some food for him. And he's like, wait a minute, where is the woman? And after he left, we saw Tarantino say, come and watch TV with me, and he like sort of like pats in the bed and says, come here. And when he comes in and Tarantino's like avoiding the subject, he's like, okay, before you see it, let me explain what happened. And he opens the door, and the directing here is very specific. The camera's tracking into Clooney as there's just these quick flashes of like the bloody bed and whatever's happened in this room. And Tarantino's trying to justify it and say, oh, she tried to run, she tried to do this. And then we eventually see like she's lying in the bed with like a pillow over her head with bullets, like holes and blood everywhere.
Yeah.
And there's nothing to really suggest necessarily at this point. At least I didn't think anything suggested that there was like a rape that had happened. It's actually what Clooney says afterwards that makes us all go, oh wait, did he do that too? Because Tarantino, he gets grabbed by Clooney, and Clooney says, like, is this because of me? Is this what you think I am? Do you think this is who I am and what I do? As this criminal who's in prison, like, I'm a thief. I'm a professional thief who doesn't kill unless he has to, and I certainly don't rape women. Which, even if he didn't do it to this particular woman who's just killed, it certainly sets everything up where every time he looks at Juliette Lewis for the rest of the movie, you're like, ugh, or what's he going to try and do, or like, you're just uncomfortable. There's this tension the entire time, every single time they're on screen together from that point on.
And they kind of set up like this thing where he's like hearing her, like things that she's not saying. So like, I think there's maybe an idea here where, he's, when he's like looking at these women, he's imagining them saying like, hey, let's do this or do that. And then, to him, it's like, okay, yeah. Which is very creepy and unsettling.
Yeah, and I was thinking. I mean, I don't know if the movie's trying to be deep, because I don't think it is. It's just a really well made, slick monster vampire movie. But I was trying to think about kind of relating the characters of Seth Gecko, which is George Clooney, and Harvey Keitel. Harvey Keitel, who we get introduced to kind of like just after the death of this woman, or just before maybe even, is he's traveling in the RV with these two kids, and he's a pastor who's given up his position because he's essentially lost faith because his wife died in a car accident, and he's kind of like questioning everything. And I was trying to think about, like, Seth's determination to look out for his brother, even though he's like terrified of what he is, and like the fact that he's this dark character who does kill people, who does assault people, who does do all these things, but he's still determined to sort of like stick by him no matter what. And I was just trying to think about if there was any correlation to like him coming to terms with who his brother is, and with Harvey Keitel coming to terms that he still has faith and he needs to have faith because of what's going to happen in the movie. And I never quite did sort of link it up, but it definitely, I think, gives the two characters. There's a reason why eventually in the movie it feels like there's kind of a weird mutual respect or understanding between Seth and Harvey Keitel, where they kind of like see eye to eye, and like there's a obviously early on, because basically the reason why they kidnapped him was because Tarantino's killed the hostage they had, so they need a new set of hostages. And they've got an RV, they can help us cross the border. So it becomes this kind of like, okay, you're going to take us across the border, you're going to talk to the crossing, the border crossing guards, and you're going to, get us in without being, searched or anything like that. And at least a lot of tense moments where they're being, questioned, and Harvey Keitel kind of messes up, and they come on board and all the rest of it. But all of these beats leading up to get to the border, which are very, like, they're just very, like, Tarantino does this thing where when he writes dialogue, like, there's so many scenes with just characters like just looking at each other talking, and somehow he has like so much like ups and downs and so much like tension just through dialogue that it makes other movies just feel, I don't know, like he's above and beyond. It's like he gets more out of two people talking than most directors do out of just like characters like jumping around and throwing punches and action scenes and stuff. Yeah,
I mean, I don't think it's like that controversial to say that Tarantino's pretty freaking good. I feel like maybe like lately, like when Once Upon a Time in Hollywood was coming out, I did start to see that there was some like people out there that seemed like they're kind of trying to be like, oh, come on, he's not that good, and like, he's overrated and blah blah, and like, I don't know, like I disagree with that. Like I think there's definitely like a reason why his stuff is so popular and why it feels like an event when his movies come out. Like, it's just, I mean,
obviously there's taste, obviously, like, you can like or dislike him, but I think it's very similar to Christopher Nolan, and again, not perfect, and there's taste associated with these movies, but I think both Nolan and Tarantino are two of the few directors that when their name is attached to a movie and it comes up saying directed by Tarantino or Christopher Nolan, it does feel like an event. It feels like a big deal, and people care about it. So,
it's like one of the few times where it's like, you can still get excited by a movie that's not like, that's based on the creators and not the IP. Like, it's like, oh, cool, like, that's original. It's not like, oh, I'm excited for this because it's Tarantino doing the Avengers. It's like, oh no, it's I'm excited for this because Tarantino just knows how to make really interesting characters, and you just kind of want to live in whenever he sets something up, it's like a world you just kind of want to live in. Like like I really liked Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and it just felt like, oh yeah, I just want to kind of be in this world for a while. I want to see where these characters go and what they do.
Yeah, for sure. So I like all this stuff in the first half with the family, and because there's a whole scene where Clooney's talking to Keitel and he's asking about how his wife died, and he's reluctantly sort of giving him this information, but eventually says, like, I'm not going to tell you any more about myself, about the fact that I used to be a pastor, because he's asking like, oh, what changed, what happened, blah blah blah. And
I think it's kind of funny here too. Like, you can, again, like, Clooney is so charming, like you can kind of see why, like, like Harvey Keitel, since he's like, the daddy's very protective, so he's like very standoffish towards like forming a friendship, but you can kind of see like the kids starting to endear themselves to him, which I think is like kind of funny, because it's, again, he's just like such a likable guy that you can't really help but be like attracted to him.
Yeah, I mean, once they get across the border and they get to the bar, and again, it feels like Harvey Keitel steps in to like sort of stop a fight, because they're about to fight George Clooney, because they say that the bar's only for truckers and bikers and stuff like that, and he kind of argues his way
essentially
into
people that won't be missed.
Exactly, yeah, it's people who will easy to drop off the radar, but he kind of de-escalates it, and then Clooney sits down, they're waiting, they've got a contact to help, like, get rid of their money and like get safe haven. That's basically their whole goal in the movie. But they sit down at the table with drinks, and he encourages the kids to drink, neither of whom have really drink because they're both under 21, She's not far off, I don't think, though. She's like maybe 19 or 20 supposedly in the movie. But
you kind of with the way people are treating her, you kind of hope that she's a little older, like that. Man, that always gets me, that the border guard scene where he opens the bathroom door and she's there, and like, yeah, obviously he's like, oh, excuse me, but then like the way he's looking at her like way too long, it's so gross.
yeah, he peers quite a bit, which is especially, it's not even like his, I mean, not that this would make it right, but it's especially weird because her father is like sitting just up front, and like, I don't know, there's just an odd time to get pervy, I guess. But I mean, I guess if you're a pervy dude, then there's no wrong time to be pervy in your mind, I would imagine.
It's always perv clock.
It's always pervert clock. Yes, that's quite right. Quite right.
That's a T-shirt in the Mild Fuzz store.
But yeah, because they're on they get to the bar. It's like this kind of rough place. There's like topless strippers like just dancing around everywhere. But this scene where he kind of insists that this is the thing, at this point in the movie, there's this tension's kind of been lifted. But okay, you're hanging around with us for now. But he's like, hey, you got us across the border. I kind of like you guys now. Just don't do anything stupid and we're cool, because like, let's go get a drink and you're waiting around with us. But ultimately, George Clooney starts being a lot more happy about things. It really presents an interesting dynamic. And obviously putting them into a situation where they kind of have to all work together is important. For the arcs of the characters, because the whole point is that these like people who are so opposed to begin with because one is kidnapping the other, but by the end they're kind of comrades because they're trying to survive. I guess vampires bring human beings together in a way that other things just don't. But of course Tarantino dies quite quickly once stuff happens. Which leads to a big dramatic moment where like Clooney has to stake his own brother. Although that's quite later on, admittedly, because of course I am glossing over the scene where Salma Hayek comes out and sticks her foot in Tarantino's mouth,
right,
and spits booze into his mouth, and all sorts of weird kinky shit going on here. Tarantino's just writing his own fan fiction and living it, apparently.
So like a couple of important things here, I think. One, like, you mentioned before that Cheech Marin has like 3 different roles in this. First we see him as the border patrol guy, and then he's the bouncer at the bar,
who lists every type of pussy that they have on offer at the bar. Some of which is extremely disturbing, and because at first he's just sort of listing like races, like we got white pussy, we got black pussy, so on and so on. But then he starts getting really weird with it, like really weird. I did not expect chicken pussy to be a phrase that was uttered ever in my life, but that's where he goes by the end. And
then like you said, it's once you're inside, it's it looks like very like typical like like scary biker kind of bar place, of course / strip club, but then another like Robert Rodriguez favorite, we get to see a very young Danny Trejo as the bartender.
That's the thing, like if he was in something now, I would say him being there was like kind of like how Fred Williamson and Tom Savini are kind of like, hey, these are callbacks to like genre icons and like B-movie stars and stuff. I feel like Danny Trejo would fit that description now. At the time, though, he wasn't, because this was Danny Trejo, young and relatively early in his movie career. It wasn't the start of his movie career, because I actually saw him in a movie that I watched on stream called Runaway Train. Which wasn't that good a movie, admittedly. It sounded better than it was, but it is what it is. Danny Trejo, man, no, it's this sort of thriller. 2 convicts sort of like commandeer a train, and they're on the run from the law. Danny Trejo has 394 acting credits on IMDb.
Jesus.
In fact, he has maybe like 20 or so in like either production or post-production or pre-production. Wow. So he's got a lot that's not even been released yet, which is insane. But the dude, obviously it was nice to see him. I mean, it's not even I mean, he was in a lot of stuff before then. Don't get me wrong. Like he was in a lot of stuff before, because the Runaway Train was 1986, so he'd been in stuff for like 10 years by this point.
But like, yeah, I think the thing is, like you're saying, like he wasn't really a name. Like,
yeah,
like maybe when you watched it, you would have been like, oh, hey, it's that guy. But like, yeah, most people probably didn't know him by name at that point.
yeah, he'd already been in like Heat, for example. He was in Heat a year before, which is obviously a big movie, so that's kind of cool. Interestingly, he's in From Dusk Till Dawn 2.
Oh, okay, interesting.
Is he playing the same character? No, he's not. Although they both had the same first name. I wonder if they're doing some sort of weird thing where he's like his own brother or something like that.
I think I've seen like one of the sequels before. I couldn't tell you anything about it.
After paternity leave, it feels like something we'll have to get to, I think.
Okay.
Is 2 and 3, 2 starring Robert Patrick.
Okay.
But no, it's nice seeing him there too. There's a whole. It's nice seeing all these faces. Once the carnage starts though, so the rules in this movie are pretty typical. Wooden stakes are still kind of the main thing that are killing things. They mention holy water. I like that they acknowledge a couple of other things that they don't have access to. Like they mention how they like garlic works, but like, well, we don't have any, so it doesn't come up, kind of thing. I do appreciate that. I like George Clooney's speech after the first big fight, where he's like, "Look, I don't believe in vampires, but what I just saw were effing vampires, so we're just going to have to accept that and move on with our lives." But
yeah, I absolutely love that. Like, I understand it, but I always kind of hate the trope where you have to get over this hurdle for the characters to realize what they're dealing with, and I like that it's just very much like, hey, come on, we all saw what just happened, we know what this is, like, how are we gonna fight it now?
Yeah, and I like how by the end of this first fight, like, our two sort of B-movie sort of characters, which is Fred Williamson and Sex Machine, Thomas Savini, like, they're in a lineup with George Clooney and Harvey Keitel, and it's like, okay, now we've got this ragtag group of, like, fighters working together against the vampires. And that stuff's surprising. And you could have totally started the movie with them arriving at the bar and just made the bar stuff longer. You really could have. But that's not what the movie is, and that's okay. But we see vampires melting here. We see probably the most goofy B-movie thing that happens for a while here is Fred Williamson just ripping out at the heart of a vampire, and then it still beats in his hand until he stabs it with a pencil, and then the vampire finally dies. It's just really funny stuff.
Yeah, I think one of my favorite parts is Fred Williamson again. I forget what his character's name was. Was it like,
I think it's just Frost. That's really simple.
Frost? Okay. He like kicks over a table, and then he just continuously like just body slams like women onto the legs of the table until and then you just kind of see this end shot of like bodies on each one. I just really like that.
Yeah, that's because I guess really B-movie. I that's what I really mean by this, is that it's not just that they're fighting vampires, that the tone takes a complete shift, because now it's like ripping hearts out, body slamming out of the legs for really goofy sort of like fun moments. I'm not complaining.
Yeah. There's like out of nowhere that there was like a band like playing guitars and stuff before, and then as soon as this stuff switches over, there all of a sudden like their instruments are made out of body parts, which is incredibly goofy. Like you feel like you would see that in like Evil Dead 2 or something, but again because of the tone shift and everything that's going on, it kind of works in this very cheesy B-movie tone.
Yeah, all the vampire stuff starts because Tarantino's hand, the bouncer, because George Clooney beat up Cheech the bouncer before they came in. So when they come in to sort of start a fight, they stab Tarantino's hand, which already had a gunshot through it from the opening scene. And the blood's dripping from it, and this makes Salma Hayek sort of she starts sniffing, and she's like sort of turns into, for some reason she turns into like a complete reptile head. And then there's a couple of other vampires that really specifically have like different sort of forms. Like most of them just sort of have like more sort of vampire looking faces, but there's a couple of them that have more sort of monstrous heads, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, and then like even Sex Machine, who ends up getting bit, he like transforms into like this weird kind of rat monster. Eventually,
yeah, he does. They make them all these characters likable enough where he kind of like it helps Juliette Lewis's character and sort of asks her name, and She's like, "Oh, I'm Kate. Like, what's your name?" And he's like, "Oh, I'm Sex Machine. Nice to meet you." And they shake hands. And it's just he says it. He doesn't say it like a sort of like I'm Sex Machine, baby. He just says it. It's just very straight faced. That's his name. Happy, very pleasantly. "Oh, I'm Sex Machine. Nice to meet you."
It's so funny.
Yeah, it's great. Like all that's good. And then Fred Williams starts talking about Nam. Like, I was in Nam in '72, and like pile of dead bodies, and I had to do this to survive, and it really sets him up as this very capable guy.
It's so great, and it's like a when he's giving that big speech, and then it's it feels very much like the like Quint's speech from Jaws or something, where it's like, all right, now things have quieted down before, and you got this kind of hardened hero talking about their past, and then I like that. Yeah, it just ends with like a sex machine is kind of creepily creeping up on him and then just taking a bite out of him, which and it's kind of funny too. The like in a way, the creatures, it almost feels a bit like zombie rules too, where there's not like this siring process with the vampires. It is more like you get bit and then like you're
because Sex Machine doesn't get bit in the neck; he gets bit in the arm, just kind of randomly. So they do a little bit of a zombie kind of rule with that, which. I mean, I don't necessarily like that in general for vampire. It works fine in this movie, but it's kind of the thing where, like, I do respect the idea of the vampire having to make the choice to sire them properly, so that not everyone who gets bit comes back as a vampire. I kind of like that take on mythology. But one of the things that stuck out to me is like we have militant vampires, which obviously we did Fright Night earlier in the month, and that like had the militant vampires for the most part too. And the other correlation here that I think is kind of interesting, although I think I like it here maybe a little bit more. But what's that from Fright Night?
What?
That was Fright Night.
Melting?
No, the melting definitely was. But the other thing I'm about to bring up is that this idea that once they're sort of, because they kill all the vampires more or less that are in the building. And the danger comes from the fact that all these bats are going to be swarming the place, and they're all going to turn to vampires, and they're going to have to try and like hide or fend themselves off till morning. And George Clooney like turns to Harvey Keitel and says, like, "Hey, you've lost your faith, but if you like can find your way back to that, you're actually our biggest weapon. You can turn the tap water into a weapon. You can." Like, bless us, you can, you're actually the biggest tool we have in order to fight these bastards because you're a pastor. You can bless water and shit like that. And the reason why I was comparing this to Fright Night a little bit is the idea of, like, in Fright Night, remember the cross only worked if you believed in it kind of thing?
Yeah.
I kind of like, the closest thing we kind of really have to an arc for him is this idea that, he kind of has to believe in his faith again to kind of fight back. And, like, I think there's something really kind of about the visual of him making a cross with a shotgun and then like occasionally firing the shotgun but then holding it back up as a cross as he's like backing away later on. But and he blesses the holy water that goes into his kid's water gun when they're getting ready to fight back, because he ultimately gets bit and he knows he's dying. He threatens to shoot himself if the kids don't promise to kill him when he becomes a vampire, which they wouldn't actually kill him though because he's already turned into a vampire, so it's kind of an empty threat outside of just he will die quicker, I suppose. But how do you feel about the very phallic stake driver thing that George Clooney ends up with?
I think it's great. I mean, this whole section is so fun. Like they go, they're kind of forced into this back room once like, all these more and more vampires start to appear, and like we said earlier, the idea that these vampires are feeding on like kind of truckers and people just kind of like driving through that won't really be missed, so they have like all this extra like loot and stuff that they take from them, so there's like just this kind of hodgepodge of different things they can use as weapons. I think it's so cool, like gearing up and then seeing everyone kind of have their different thing, and then Clooney just making this giant, like I don't even know exactly what it is, some type of drill thing, I guess.
I assume it's like a jackhammer that he's converted. So, maybe. Yeah. He's put like a wooden stake on the end of it or something like that.
Yeah. But no, I mean, super cool. And then it's just very funny him holding up, and obviously, it does seem very phallic.
Yeah, and then you've got the whole. I mean, and it's not the only phallic weapon. We've already mentioned Sex Machine's gun dick.
Yeah.
That has the two chambers, so it looks like a cock and balls. But no, I like later on when they realize it's daylight and she uses what bullets she has left to sort of make these beams of light to sort of protect them. because obviously Harvey Keitel ends up killing his son when he turns into a vampire. And then Juliette Lewis has to shoot her brother in the head because he begs her to when he's getting bit. So, it's really dark, and she's left with kind of nothing. They do survive, though. Eventually, the guy, who's also Cheech, shows up to meet George Clooney. And, George Clooney, basically negotiates his cut a little bit, because he's better, pay him so much for, keeping him off the grid. And... he does this thing where he apologizes to Juliette Lewis because he does genuinely feel bad for getting her whole family killed. And even she says, sorry, I'm sorry your brother died, kind of thing. And he gives her, a wad of cash, hey, go home and, start your life over. And, because he probably hands her, 10 grand or something like that. I don't know, whatever the amount it may be. As kind of a, hey, this is to pay for your horrible night and the death of your family. Go on. But, it's a... Joe, it is. It's a really solid, fun B movie. Essentially, it takes itself seriously, for at least for half of it, and then gets really fun with its silliness. But as I was watching the opening and as the titles were coming up, I was kind of going, you know what? They don't make enough movies like this anymore. Everything doesn't have this style. It feels like everything's, I don't know. It's one of these things where it's easy to cherry pick the good stuff from the past and say that it's all crap now because we watch so much crap. But there's definitely styles of movie that I feel like, man, why don't we get things that feel like this? Why is there not movies that feel like are this slick, that have this level of craft behind them? And maybe it's just a case of, yes, not every B movie can be directed by Rodriguez and written by Tarantino, but
no,
really
I mean, it really feels unique and special, and I can't really think of anything necessarily like it, or especially anything that we gotten in the last 5-10 years. So no, I agree with that.
I mean, I would say the vampires themselves are I'm not really into melting vampires. Vampires should be dusting. That is my opinion on the vampire mythology, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't affect my enjoyment of the movie, because I'm having such a blast with all these characters. And like you say, some of these characters in the bar, you wish they lasted a bit longer, because they're fun to watch, and it feels like I said, you could start this movie with them arriving at the bar and just sort of reveal through backstory, what why they're here and how they got there, and you could spend a lot more time with these other characters and have more of a kind of a siege kind of thing before you get to all the stuff that would eventually end with. But there's other movies for that, and I think this having that first half really gives the second half this context that is so rare in these types of B movies, that that it's unique and it feels different, and I don't think I would change any of it because it's what makes it From Dusk Till Dawn. So
I mean, it's it's always a good complaint to have when when you're really just saying I want to see more of this. That's a testament to the strength of the characters. I mean, I think what we get is the right call. It might take away if from what's kind of special about it, if it is more of just a traditional hey, here are these guys and we're gonna follow them, whatever. But it's no, everything is so cool and likable that you can't help but kind of want to spend more time in that.
There's a nice touch as well, because earlier on in the film, there's a couple of moments where George Clooney's kind of influencing Kate, Juliette Lewis's character, where he makes her drink and she kind of gets into it and asks for a second one, and Harvey Keitel doesn't seem too pleased that he's kind of having this influence on her. And I think it says something at the end of the movie. George Clooney, when she says, "Hey, do you want some company?" Because she has nowhere to go. She's like, "Hey, can I just come with you and I'll be with you now." And George Clooney, I think there's kind of a little bit of a character thing there where he says no, and he says no, go home. You don't want to be a part of the world that I'm going to be in, and I think that's him saying no, I don't want to influence you. I realize that you becoming part of my world is worse for you. So it's almost like he's respecting the wishes of her father, and he's doing the right thing. For whatever reason, whether it's because he respects her father, whether it's because he knows that he's in a life that she shouldn't be in. But it does feel like a good character beat at the end for him to say no, go home. And then the final shot, of course, reveals that this bar is actually the top of an old Mayan-looking pyramid. With all these trucks and old vehicles all just thrown down the back of it and stuff like that.
I think that's really cool.
Yeah, it's
I like
obviously
that.
it's obviously a painting, but it's got charm. I'm not complaining about that.
Yeah. No, I totally like that, and I really like the ending. And yeah, I feel like other movies might be tempted to even have like maybe even like even though she's very young, like to hint at like a romantic angle or something. But yeah, I like that they don't go there, and it is like no, yeah, like this isn't your life. You shouldn't idolize this. Like, I also really like when he's meeting up with the final Cheech character. I like that like other movies I feel like might be tempted to have some type of plot reveal where he's working with the vampires or something, or there was a reason why they led them there. But I like that his like he was like, why'd you pick this place? And he was just like, I don't know, it's out of the way, it was open all night, you wanted to meet in the morning. Like I like that it's just very there's no reason for it, there's no big like reveal or anything. It's just like no, wrong place, wrong time.
Yeah, I picked this place because it looked like a good place to pick. I've never been here before. It's just the way it is. Actually thinking about it, I think I've maybe kind of got a connection thematically between the two lead characters, meaning George Clooney and Harvey Keitel. I think what connects them both, or what kind of like like George Clooney's character, like his thing is that he's so sure of who he is. Like that's the big thing in that scene early on where he like grabs Tarantino and like yells at him for killing the woman, and like what he does to women, and how he just kills people left and right. He says, "You think this is what I am?" I think the whole idea of like the two characters, like him and Harvey Keitel, is that they're both like struggling with their identity, where Clooney like seems to know what he is, but his brother's kind of like getting in the way of him just being that. And I think alternatively, Harvey Keitel's lost who he is, and he's unsure of who he is because he's lost his faith. So later on in the film, you have two scenes. You have Harvey Keitel at the table where he says, "Look, you've won. Why can't you enjoy that you've won? Like everything's worked out, and yet you're still kind of unhappy for some reason." And then after that, you have Clooney saying, "Hey, you have to find your faith again because that's going to be our biggest weapon." It's basically this encounter makes them both kind of confident and sure of who they are. And maybe that's why Clooney making that decision at the end of the movie to say, "No, you're not coming with me. You're going to go and be someone else because that's not I know who I am, and that's not for you." So yeah, I think ultimately this movie's about Clooney and Keitel both kind of like rediscovering and being sure of who they are. And maybe that's why and even though I said Clooney still has to find it a little bit, I think Clooney is more sure of who he is based on what he's saying. Based on what he says to Tarantino, but maybe that's the idea, is that he does know who he is. It's just that Tarantino's kind of like keeps stopping him from outright being it. But I think that's maybe why the kids start to kind of like almost take to him a little bit, is because unlike their father, he is sure of who he is. He is confident. He for good or bad, he is what he is, and he knows who he is. Whereas their father is kind of unclear. He doesn't really know what he wants to do. He's kind of searching for himself a little bit. So there you go. That's my analysis.
Yeah, I like that. That's it's I didn't really think about that, but that's a good take for sure.
All right, okay, I guess we're ready to rate the movie then, Timmy. So, what would you like to give From Dusk Till Dawn?
You know what, I think I'm gonna go actually really high. I think I'm gonna give it a 9, which honestly, like after rewatching it for a while, before that, I don't think I would have gone that high. I'd be like, yeah, that's probably good. Like 7.5, maybe 8. But I mean, rewatching it after a while, it's just like I can't really think of anything to complain about. Like, I mean, the only thing that really I can say is like, that there's some 90s special effects that don't hold up super well. Like, some of the face morphing and stuff when it's like kind of CGI. I think it doesn't look great, but
I think the melting of the vampires when the dialogue's good, but I think what you're talking about is when like Selma Hayek's head turns into the monster head. Yeah, exactly. That stuff looks iffy. Yeah,
that stuff's a little dodgy, and I don't know. Maybe there's some stuff that I feel like I feel like maybe we could have gotten like a little bit more sense of a character of like the son, because like Juliet Louis-Dreyfus, like or not Dreyfus, but Juliette Lewis,
wrong person. Yes.
But like she feels like a more fully fleshed out character, and like the son though, I feel like you really don't
Nah.
learn much about him or anything. So I mean, there's a few nitpicks here and there with that stuff, but like overall, it's just such a fun and engrossing and compelling movie. And again, because of these melding of like these two halves, like these kind of different genres, it makes it feel really special and unique, like to the point where I can't really think of much else like it, you know. And again, you know, you mentioned before, like everything just feels really slick, and you know, you're dealing with like a lot of, you know, just great performers and writers and directors that yeah, it's just such a blast, that yeah, I really like it.
Yeah, actually, I guess a major nitpick, if I were to give it one, is that for a movie where the last half is set entirely in Mexico, there's almost like no Spanish speaking of like at all. Like, I think the
That's
band's
true.
singing
Yeah.
Spanish, but you know, Cheech when he's like yelling outside to like entice people in, he's speaking in Spanish, or sorry, speaking in English, sorry, and then like everyone who works in the place are all speaking English, like without fault. And not that I'm saying that there shouldn't be any English, but it kind of feels weird that there's like everything is just English by default. It's almost like it's just because it's a
True, yeah.
movie, everything's in English without anyone even saying, "Hey, we're Americans, speak English" or something. You know, like
Yeah.
anyway, um, yeah. As far as my rating goes, it is tough because I think, you know, similarly beforehand, I would have said I would have been really positive about the movie, but I think watching it again is like sort of reignited and made me remember, okay, this is actually really good. This is maybe even stronger than I remembered it being. I think I'm going to go a nudge lower and say 8.5. I think it's a really great movie. It is very well directed. It's very well written. The performances across the board are very good. There, you know, there's maybe a bit more meat on the bone than maybe I originally thought as well, having thought about it more as we're talking about it. But it's, you know, like maybe the vampire sort of mythology in this isn't my favorite kind of thing, or like you say, the goofy Salma Hayek, like Monster Head and that kind of stuff. Maybe just it takes a little bit off of it here or there. But it is a really, really strong movie, and I had a blast watching it again. So there you go. That is From Dusk Till Dawn, and I can't wait to see how bad the sequels are. So we'll get there in due course. Well, if you made it this far in the review, I can't say some of the more obvious things because they're all sweary or dirty. So how about how about we just go with, say, Sex Machine? If you know, put that in the comments.
There you
If you made it this far in the review, just put in Sex Machine. There, I will make Tim do his pose for the thumbnail. So 3, 2, 1, pose. Why not? I mean, why not? So yes, there you go. Earlier on, we mentioned liking, of course, is really important, as patreon.com/MailFuzzTV if you want to support all the content and get bonuses. So please go and look at all that stuff. You can catch us on Twitter at Screams Midnight for updates and random jokey stuff and whatever else we happen to throw on there. So please do that. Otherwise, you know, I don't do this often enough, but check out some of the other content that we have. I do a sci-fi movie podcast just like this one with Tara, called The Atomic Cinema Experiment. So, you know, have a go look at that and see if you're interested. We're almost at, in fact, actually, by the time this goes up, we should be just over 100 episodes of that. So that's booming. So go and have a look-see. But yeah, but that is us. So thank you once again for watching or listening. We always appreciate it. Keep watching scary movies, and we will see you next time.